We are recording with Mr. Mike Vecchione on Tuesday, March March 4th,
Or
2025. I'm losing my mind. 2025 at 11:07 a.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Mike Vecchi. You've been on here a zillion times before, and as I was telling you beforehand, I don't know why I was talking to you like you were a first-time guest. But Book 3 of Fallen Angel came out in November, and we're going to be discussing that. And then we were just talking about, obviously, for listeners, we've had Jimmy Dennedy on with you a couple times, and that book's still bouncing around. And I think you said you're working on that, so we'll get to that. But it's been a minute since you were here, as I was just telling you
yeah,
off air. It's been a hectic. Yeah, as Apollo knows, it's been a hectic New Year's, but we're back in the saddle, and this is like the only like second or third show I've done with Apollo off screen. So Mike, you're a guinea pig. So thank you for well, I didn't tell you beforehand. You were voluntold, but you're a guinea pig for the newest iteration of the podcast. But with that, guys, please go in the description. You can find the links to all of Mike's. Mike has legitimately been a regular guest since 2020. You can find his books going all the way back. And I first got to know you through Bruce Sackman. But Mike, I'm going to hand it over to you, sir. Take it away.
hey, well, first of all, thank you very much, Tom, for having me back.
Yes, sir.
And I know this sounds crazy, but Happy New Year. Haven't
Yeah,
seen
no,
you,
I
heard
haven't
from
seen
you.
you since.
You
Yeah, yeah, that's
know?
on. Yeah,
So
Happy New Year,
so
buddy.
that's, I'm glad that I'm glad that we're back together again.
Yes,
And
sir.
thanks again, of course, for having me. And let me just put, if I hold this thing up, hopefully you'll be able to see it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cover of book three, and it's got a design. The cover was designed by my wife, and the kaleidoscope kind of circle in the middle has to do with the idea that the title is Fallen Angel Book Three, a true crime fantasy, anarchy, chaos, and peace with a question mark. So, for those of your listeners and viewers who don't know the whole premise of the Fallen Angel series, this is book three. And by the way, I've got the okay to do a book four as well, which I'll be doing. So the idea came to me after I was unable to convince book agents to allow me to or to be able to sell a book of short stories, true crime short stories. They told me that they couldn't do it. True crime fans like long form, and the short stories wouldn't sell. They said, if you can find a way to tie the stories together, then perhaps you can do that. You can sell it. We can do it. So I go back to I racked my brain and I came back to an idea that I had when I was actually trying one of the first cases I ever tried when I went back to the DA's office after having been out of the Brooklyn DA's office for about 10 years. I went back and I was handed a case that you and I have talked about many times involving the murder of a young Hasidic woman who was walking the Williamsburg Bridge here in New York on Sunday mornings to as exercise, and she was set upon by a junkie who thought she had money, and she didn't have money, and she was killed on a remote portion of the bridge. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, he stripped her of her clothes, violated her to make it seem as if a sex offender had killed her. And if that wasn't enough, he went back that night with an accomplice, poured gasoline over the body, and burnt her.
It
And
is still to date the most fucked up story you've ever told me.
yeah, it was a horrendous story. In fact, I wrote
Yeah,
a
Murder on the Bridge. Yeah.
book called Murder on the Bridge. Um, so when I was trying that case, and I'm standing in front of the jury to sum up, the horror of it was clearly expressed to the jury. They got it. They got the whole point. And I said to them that it's as if the devil had come to Brooklyn and committed this crime himself. That's how horrific it was. So that, of course, I got a conviction. Guy was sentenced to 25 years to life. I then convicted him again because the devil killed his best friend, stole money from him, and killed him after the best friend had been kind of supporting his life at that point. He'd been giving him shelter and food, etc. The guy was a junkie, a stone cold junkie. And then he killed him because he didn't like the fact that the friend told him, "No, I'm not helping you this time." So I convicted them of that. So he's now doing 50 years to life in New York State prison. So, so that came to me as I was thinking, how do I wrap these stories up? And I thought that the idea of the devil coming to Brooklyn and being the instigator of the horrific crimes that I handled when I was in the DA's office, some of the most horrific crimes, this being one of them, might actually be able to, I might be able to put together a proposal and sell that proposal to a publisher. So I did. I wrote the proposal and I sent it to a publisher, someone who had a show almost just like yours, and I had been on a while to publicize my other books. And she got back to me very quickly, and she said, "Mike, not only do I love it, my editors love this idea, and we love it so much. We want you to do it, but we want you to write a series. We want you to do a series of 3 books." And that's how Fallen Angel was born. I came up with the idea of calling it a true crime fantasy because all of the crimes that are depicted in the books are true, and I handle them. The fantasy part is the fact that in my world of Fallen Angel, the devil is the instigator of those crimes. So that's the genesis of the the project. And book one was I love doing it, by the way, and I did book one, book two, and now book three, and I've progressed to the point where I thought that I needed to at least leave the reader with the idea that maybe at the end this might be the end. Maybe the devil has been defeated so often by Michael Gioca, who is the protagonist, based on someone who happened to be the chief of the rackets division in the Brooklyn DA's office, that the devil would leave Brooklyn and never come back. Leading up to that point, the anarchy, chaos is the fact that he has created and done three and been involved in several really horrific crimes, ones that would affect anybody, any city's, infrastructure in terms of the way that the people think, and in one situation, actually created a, a atmosphere that led to rioting that occurred over the course of 3, 4, 5 days. Now, book begins with a murder of 2 police officers. And you mentioned Jimmy Dennedy, who is a retired New York City detective. And I met Jimmy doing this particular case, the case that I used as the model for part one of this book. In real life, these 2 police officers were just simply on patrol one evening and encountered or came upon 2 individuals who in the past had been accused of murder, in fact, had been in prison in a really notorious prison in New York called Attica. And Attica prison suffered a series of riots over the course of years earlier. And these 2 guys were instigators of those riots. In fact, they killed people during those riots. And they came to Brooklyn after being pardoned by the governor, who had lost his mind, I think, at that time. And the cops didn't know who they were, but they didn't look like people. They looked suspicious. And they just simply stopped them and say, "Hey, fellas, what are you guys doing here?" And these 2 guys opened up and killed the 2 police officers. And in the gun battle, one of the 2 was shot and killed himself. Jimmy Dennedy was in the precinct, dropping off a pair of boots, actually, that he had borrowed from a fellow cop, and heard over the radio the call of this murder. Jumped in his friend's car, went to the scene, and found one of his colleagues on the ground. One had been taken away. Another one was on the ground. They put him into Jimmy's friend's car, and Jimmy gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on the way to the hospital, but lost him. He died. On the way, and in the book, the cop who is called Denny James. I changed the name somewhat. Sees a an automobile accident on the way to the hospital, and he in his mind he says, you know, it's really odd for some reason, and he struck him as being odd, and he asked his buddy, let's drive back to that automobile accident because there's something about it that doesn't sit right with me. And when they got back, the person who was in the driver's seat was being taken out of the car by an ambulance by ambulance personnel, and they noticed he had a gunshot wound, what they knew was a gunshot wound of his leg. And they asked the personnel, EMTs, to let them look at the wound, and they discovered that it was a gunshot wound. Jimmy said, you know, this is not a coincidence. It has to be tied to the incident that occurred not that far away. And he called into the police officers who were still at the scene, told them to bring one of the witnesses to the scene of the car accident. And they did that, and this woman identifies him as the shooter and the killer of the police officers. So that is the basis of the story of book one. Now, how did the two people in my story get together? And that's another interesting story. In book two, if you remember us discussing it, there was an arsonist who set fire to a hotel in Manhattan,
Mm-hmm.
along with the devil. I call him Jizz in the book, and Jizz, of course, gets away. The arsonist also gets away, but is captured in Brooklyn for another murder. And during the time that that murder is being tried, the case is being tried, he appears on television, and two individuals who had been at the hotel saw the pictures and recognized him as the person who they saw start this fire at the hotel. Now, they were two illegal migrants who had come to New York and didn't want to come forward immediately because they didn't know if they'd be deported. But you know, given the atmosphere that occurred and that was occurring and still occurring in New York City, they felt that they wouldn't get deported. They went to the police. The police arrested this guy Ricky Sabar as the arsonist, as well as the arsonist that started this hotel fire, which resulted in the death of a fire marshal. He goes to jail. He gets convicted. Michael tries the case, and while in jail, he meets another guy who saves him in terms of helping him out because there are people in jail who don't like this arsonist, and he becomes friends, and they're cellmates. And with the devil's help, they concoct an escape plan from Attica prison. And here it is. Here's the escape plan. The devil planted a guy into the purchasing office of the prison. And the purchasing office made some purchases. They bought brand new, huge washing machines for the laundry. When the new washing machines came to the prison, these two individuals, Ricky and the other guy's name is Jax Chase, helped unload the new washing machines and load the old washing machines onto the delivery truck. The plan was for them to then, with a guard who had been compromised by the devil turning his head, they hid in the washing machines. And when the truck took off, these two guys were in the old washing machines in the back of the truck. And when they got to the first rest stop where the driver of the truck had to get a cup of coffee, they get out. The devil had left a car for them, clothes for them, and they get in and they drive to New York City.
Looney
Okay.
Tunes.
Now, you
Yep.
may say, Mike, where the hell did you come up with that idea? Guess what? I had a client who I represented, who gets convicted of murder. And while he's in prison, and by the way, he got convicted improperly. He should never have been convicted because he didn't commit the crime. But the DA's office didn't give me all of the Brady material, exculpatory material that they should have. Had I had it, I would have won the case. But he gets convicted, and we don't find out about the Brady material until 33 years later He spends 33 years in jail because of something the DA's office didn't do, which is to turn over what they should have turned over according to the law.
Why didn't they?
That's a
Did
good question. I wish
yeah.
I had because, there was an overzealous prosecutor,
No.
basically. So he tells me a story that while he's in prison, he concocts and comes up with this idea with another guy of hiding in the old washing machines that are been high that have been ordered and were going to be shipped out to the jail that he was in, the prison he was in. The issue with him and the problem why it didn't come off is because the guy in the prison who was supposed to arrange for this whole thing got cold feet at the last minute, and the escape never took place, or the attempt never took place. I remembered that, and I used it in the book, but in my story, the escape does take place. And what the devil sets up is a what he calls a big robbery in Brooklyn of diamonds that he knows are happen to be delivered at a particular location. And he sets it up and tells these two individuals who are now without money, without anything, go to Brooklyn. There's going to be a robbery. There's going to be a diamond haul. I'm going to sell it, and we'll all live in Mexico for the rest of our lives, right? The real reason he wants them to go down there is because the devil knows that there are two cops who have been hired by the jewelry store where this is going to happen with the permission of the police department to act as guards when the diamonds are delivered. And as soon as the two bad guys walk up to the door and the cops who are the guards step out, they open fire and kill them. So that is how I set up the first case, the first story, and the first section of the book. And there are other twists and turns. And one of them is the main one is that in real life, Tom, every time I talk about this, I still can't believe it. The main witness in the real murder, who was brought to the scene of the car accident to point out to see if the guy that's arrested is the shooter, she about I don't know, maybe about a month later, she goes into the hospital because she has basically a bad cold and she needs medicine. And she's in the hospital for a very short period of time. And we get a call in the DA's office that she died in the hospital of a cold. None of us believed that that was the case. We thought that these bad guys, by the way, one of them in real life belonged to a group called the Black Liberation Army.
Mm.
And they had been killing people and cops all through the 70s and 80s, So how do I handle that? I say, I gotta continue to try to make it as close to real life. So what I have the witness do is she goes to the dentist for a cleaning. And as she's sitting in the dentist chair, the technician steps out to get some materials that she needs for the cleaning. And when she comes back into the room, the woman is dead. There is no sign of any trauma, nothing, just that she's dead. The body goes to the medical examiner. Medical examiner can't find the cause of death. But Michael doesn't believe under any circumstance that this is a natural death. He knows that something has occurred. And in the trial, he needs her because she identifies the bad guy. So as it turns out, um, in real life, the first trial of this case, ends at a hung jury. And why does that happen? Because the people who represent this bad guy, today we would say that they are far left individuals. They convince people who are elites to come forward and say, we know this person, he's rehabilitated, and they all testify in his behalf. And the jury can't see past that, and there's a hung jury. In my case, I have to replicate that And the first and with a second story in mind, I have a reverend in Brooklyn who is an elite, who has a lot of elites in his congregation, and is befriended by the devil. The devil befriends him, he befriends the devil, and he winds up testifying at the trial as well. Now, Michael Gioka doesn't have the benefit of the eyewitness. He's got to overcome this character witness testimony, which he can't, and there's a hung jury. But what Michael does is he gets the dead woman has a sister also, and he asks the sister if they could exhume the body because he doesn't want to give up on trying to find the cause of death. And he wants to send the body to Washington, to the FBI lab, and have this super medical examiner who the FBI employs look at this body and see if he can find the cause of death. And as it turns out, he does. What he finds is that the woman in her throat, long, way down in her throat, he finds injury marks that he says was an object caused by an object that was stuffed down her throat and asphyxiated her. But he also finds 3 male red hairs. Now, why is that important? Because Jiz, the reverend's friend and the devil in my story, has red dreadlocks. So what happens is they are able to, but she's dead, so she still can't testify. What Gioka does is he uses a section of the law, which in New York, if the defendant or someone on his behalf causes the death of a witness, and the witness has testified in the grand jury, let's say, or at a hearing, or at a previous trial, the minutes of her testimony can be read to the jury. And that's what Michael does. He gets the judge to agree, they read the testimony, and the trial is successful. So what happens is the bad guy who's now convicted, I hate to give all of this away, but what happened, I'll give this one away. He's convicted, and on the date of his sentence, Gioka and several of the cops who worked on the case are sitting in the courtroom waiting for the judge to come out to sentence the defendant. The lawyer for the defendant is at the table. The defendant comes out, and they're now about to start the sentencing. And he sentences, he says to the lawyer, "Is your client ready for sentence?" And the lawyer makes an excuse and says, I have to, he is, but, Your Honor, I wonder if we could just put this off. And he goes into his pocket, ostensibly to look for his either calendar or his iPhone to get a new date. And he comes out with a gun, and he shoots and kills his own client in the courtroom in front of everybody. Now, how does that play into the next? What happens is when Michael goes back to his office, he finds out that the day of the sentencing, earlier that morning, a note was dropped off at the DA's office, and it was written by this prisoner who was about to be sentenced. And what it indicates is that he wants to talk to Michael Gioka. And now the idea is that the devil found out about this. He figured the guy was going to give him up, and he had to eliminate him. So he had his lawyer kill him in the courtroom. Now, when the book came out, one of my best friends, who was my predecessor as chief of the rackets division, read the book in one day. He loved it, and he said to me, "I have to believe I couldn't get over the fact that you had this defense attorney kill his client
It's such a
in the courtroom."
it's such a I would love to see it in like a dark Batman movie. Like he just takes out like a fucking Chrome
Right?
357 and blows their
Yeah,
brains out. It's just like don't let them talk. No, I love that
exactly,
imagery.
exactly. So what happens is that, of course, the lawyer gets arrested, And and Michael now is goes back to his office, and now part two occurs, happens, and part two is about the following: the son of the Reverend was friends with this prisoner who was killed. He helped him out in Attica, saved his life. It helped him out, just like I told you in real life. And he now finds out that his father admitted to him that they were going to kill him because they figured he was going to become a rat. And they did. In fact, they wanted the son to kill him, to shiv him in jail, and he wouldn't do it. So when he finds out that his father actually killed his best friend, the guy who saved his life in prison, he calls Gioka and becomes an informant. And who does he give up? His father and, of course, Jizz. Now, in real life, this story plays out. And I'm going to tell you the real life story, and I'll leave the book story to your readers. And I'll tell you why. Because I think there are certain twists and turns that I add that I think I would spoil it if I told them now. Because I really want you guys to go out and buy this book. It's really,
Yeah.
I think, a good
It's
story.
also how
So
yeah. Spoiler alert. Mike makes a buck off his books. I make a buck off my podcast. Yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah, it's a business. Keep going.
so in real life, this Reverend, his name was in real life Legrand, de Vernon Legrand. And how do I know him? I know him for several ways. One, he was his church, his so-called church, was in an apartment house that was not that far from where I grew up. And I knew that he recruited women to essentially go out and pretend to be Catholic nuns. He dressed them as Catholic nuns out into the streets of New York City to beg and to solicit money. He made, at that point, he made millions, believe it or not. Who would turn down a nun with a cup? She walks in and people are going to give, and New York's a big city, 8
Yeah.
million people here, right? What he would do then is he would have them come back. He housed them in that church, in the apartment building. But when they came home after soliciting, he would essentially imprison them. He would lock them in, wouldn't let them out until the next day when he'd send them out to solicit again. While they were in the house, he would select the few that he wanted to have sex with and raped them over and over again. He fathered about 26 or 28 kids who he also kept in the house. There were two sisters who were part of this. I mean, literally sisters, not fake nuns, who he had gotten into this whole scam, and they realized what they had gotten themselves into, and they came to the DA's office, and they told us about what was going on, and they went back to the church. They said they had to go back because they needed to keep up the scam, the whole facade. And um and it was a mistake. It was really a mistake. Why? Because they were never seen or heard of again. What happened was, years later, not that, I shouldn't say years, a year or so later, the Reverend's fake wife and someone who worked with him essentially came forward, had had enough, and told us about this whole thing, and told us that the Reverend had a camp, a fake camp, upstate New York, where he supposedly brought kids to have summer vacation, etc. He did have it, but it wasn't for that. There was a pond, like a lake, on this property. And what we discovered is that these sisters and other women who didn't obey him were slaughtered in the house, in the basement of the house in Brooklyn. Then their bodies were literally burnt to beyond recognition in a bathtub that was filled with hot oil. So they'd cut up the body, dump it into the bathtubs, burn them, and then get the scrapings, bring them upstate, and dump the scrapings into a lake. All true, Tom. All true. I found out later on a little bit more about it from a guy who was one of the people who was involved in cutting up the bodies. And he came forward after I found out his name from, believe it or not, do you remember Homicide is My Business?
Mm-hmm.
The guy, the hitman from Sicily? He went into the Brooklyn House of Detention and was in an area where one of the Reverend's sons was being held. And the son of the Reverend wanted the hitman from Sicily to kill his own brother because he felt that there was going to rat on on him and his father to give the DA information about more bodies. Why? We found, based on information that informants gave us, dove into the lake, found the remains of these women, and were able to identify the remains. And ultimately, the son and his father went on trial. They were convicted. Okay. When Luigi gave me the information that the son wanted his brother killed, and he went to Luigi because he knew he was a mafia hitman. We said to him, listen, get more information about what's going on. How, tell us where the bodies are, that kind of thing. He told us about this person who was the cutter, the guy who would cut the bodies up, who hadn't been arrested yet. He was hired by the Reverend because he used to work in the New York City morgue, and he was familiar with autopsies and taking body parts, etc. And he told me, he sat in my office, Tom, and I will never forget this. And I asked him to describe what would go on in the basement when you cut the bodies up. He said, well, he would cut them up. He had this big bathtub filled with cooking oil, and he'd heat it up. They had this kind of like this situation underneath it with
Like a
logs,
giant,
etc.
yeah, like a Bunsen burner, yeah, like
Yeah,
high
yeah.
school chemistry lab,
And he said to me, Mike, he said, when we put the bodies in,
dude.
it was like frying chicken.
Jeez, I can't. And for the record, these are all I haven't heard any of these. This is most of the ones we talk, almost if all of them, it's because I've read it and I haven't heard any of these. These are, I
Okay,
think
well,
no, I haven't. No, I will.
you haven't read book 3 yet.
No,
So,
I'll make a note of it to have it read for the next
yeah,
time. But I mean,
yes.
hey, it might be better not have them read because these are genuine reaction. I started by saying it was the murder on the bridge, but I mean, the I don't know, man. These are pretty dark.
This is and
Give,
all true, my friend.
yeah, no, it,
All true. And so the Reverend in book 3 of Fallen Angel um is put on trial because the son gives up what I just told you, what his father did. We find the person who was the cutter in the book. He gives up what he did, and the Reverend goes on trial. And here's this now moves.
I gotta interject. My older brother got me an air fryer for Christmas, and man, because he'd always come over and like, dieting. I always just get like pre-cooked but frozen chicken, and then I whatever eat it with vegetables because I'm a fat fuck, and that's how you stay full with less calories. But I'd always microwave because it was already cooked, so I didn't care. It meant he's like it's disgusting. I'm like yeah, I don't care. It's just food to eat. And he was like I can't watch you microwave chicken, so he bought me an air fryer. And every night I use it, and I love it because it sizzles and cracks and it's crispy. And I think he just ruined it for me.
Well, you got an air fryer, so it's not like frying chicken in hot oil.
No, but it's the
I mean,
same. If there is any residual oil on the chicken, it bubbles and you just ruined it for me.
okay, I'm sorry.
No, I
I'm
mean
sorry.
hey, it's what it is.
Well, let me tell you about the Reverend's trial, the real in real life. So I'm sitting in the courtroom, and I wasn't trying the case; someone else was, and I'm watching this, and the Reverend's on the stand, and he essentially his defense is, "Well, you ain't got the bodies, you ain't got the bodies," and finally the prosecutor has had enough, and he does something which is probably a little bit out of the ordinary or a lot out of the ordinary, and he says, "Really, I don't have the bodies," and he takes out from his briefcase a string of or wire on which he had body parts, fingers, toes,
Jesus
bones,
Christ.
strung together by the medical examiner. And he said the following. I'll never, again, never forget this, Tom. I'm a young assistant DA at the time. And he says, "Really?" He says, "Well, what are these?" And he throws the string of body parts up onto the witness stand at the Reverend. It was, the courtroom was, it was a huge courtroom. There wasn't a sound in the courtroom at that point, not a sound. That, I have to say, was one of the most dramatic moments I've ever seen in a trial in my life. And of course, I never forgot it. And Gioka is able to replicate that. I replicate it using Gioka in part two of Fallen Angel book three. So when I tell people that, and I've been on other shows, and I tell people that these are cases which, in real life, you say to yourself, only pure evil
Yeah.
could do the things that were done that I've seen and I've handled. And I think sometimes people don't believe it, or they think that maybe, I'm exaggerating. Tom, I am not exaggerating one bit. That's the story. And what happened, believe it or not, after Luigi gave me the information about the son wanting his brother killed, I am in my office one day, and I'm thinking about this, and we're getting ready to try to find out where the other bodies are. And I get a message from the front desk. It said, "There's a guy here to see you." I said, "Who is it?" Turns out it was the Reverend's son, the guy who the brother wanted dead. He shows up at my office and he introduces himself to me, and I'm like, I'm shocked. And he comes in, he sits down, and he becomes an informant. And he tells us all about the father. The father's now in jail doing 25 to life, and so is the son, the accomplice son. And but it was very interesting that this is a guy who had the guts to walk into the DA's office. I guess maybe he did it for protection, that he knew that his brother wanted him dead and wanted him killed because he had information as to where all of the other bodies, that the other women that were killed, what they did with them. So what we did in the DA's office, we essentially got together with the city and went to the location where we were told the bodies were buried, and it was along a highway in Queens, New York. Now, Brooklyn is west of Queens. The city is on Long Island. Is Brooklyn west? Further east is Queens, and then it turns into two different counties or out of the city, Nassau and Suffolk. On the border of Brooklyn and Queens, there was a highway being extended, I believe. And it was a lot of construction, a lot of contracting work and going on. And we were told that that's where the bodies were buried. And we sent cadaver dogs, we sent people to dig, and it made the newspapers. The DA's office is out looking for whatever. Of course, we didn't reveal what we were looking for. And unfortunately, we never came up with it. And when I drive past that location, I can't tell you how many times. And every time I drive past the location, I think about who's buried, along the side of the road or in the middle of the highway or under the concrete in that area. And honestly, I know it's going to sound like a little strange, but I say a little prayer because I know that there are bodies buried
Yeah,
down there.
I don't think that's. I don't think that. I always say a prayer when I go by like a cemetery or so. Even I mean, actually, probably around that area, where my grandma and grandpa lived close to her and old Tapan, and they would always. I mean, when we were little, I just remember it was always instilled in me. If you hear like a, if you hear a siren, you say a little prayer. But I know where that area is. It's. I've because when I used to go and like take care of my grandma in the later years of
Yeah,
her life,
yeah.
I know that like there's like that entire like marsh area and like but
There was, yeah. It's
yeah
not so much
uh,
marshy anymore,
uh
but there was, yeah.
but like yeah no
So,
my uncle was FBI, his dad was FBI, another was DEA, and they're all in the Jersey where I think most of them have passed. They're all in the Jersey area. They would always say like that, and then wherever the highway that's like parallel to Manhattan, you can see the
yeah,
skyline, I guess, where
yeah,
like the
yeah,
stadiums are.
yeah,
They always
yep.
say they're like, I remember growing up and being like, there are mob hits as
No
far as
question.
the eye
Well,
can see.
let me
Yeah, sorry.
recall something for you.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we talked about the case involving the skull that was found in the marshes along the
Yeah.
Brooklyn
Yeah.
waterfront? And
Yeah.
I did the case.
Yeah.
Well, that was another example. That's why the wise guys brought that body to that spot because it was a place, a burial ground, you know? And this was the same thing. And the Reverend and his kids, his sons, he had many of them. Um, have done that's what they did. In fact, recently there was a story in the New York newspapers. Apparently, one of the sons is still around and has now come under suspicion for something. I forgot what it was. And when I took it out, I actually posted it on Facebook with a story about book three. I put a kind of a little picture of the book and that article from the newspaper about this Reverend de Vernon Legrand. So let me just tell you what happens. And I'm going to not get into detail because, again, I want people to buy the book. So the Reverend he gets convicted. And in New York, before you get sent to state prison, you're held in Brooklyn particularly, to have Brooklyn House of Detention or maybe Rikers Island, which is a New York prison, awaiting transportation upstate New York to the prisons. So the Reverend is in the Brooklyn House of Detention when um, the when something occurs and it goes back to the shooting by the lawyer of his client. The lawyer, by the way, becomes the Reverend's lawyer in his case, and and that it goes back to that. But what happens is riots break out in Brooklyn as a result of an accident that occurs between, if you read the books, Monsignor Romano, who is Gioca's good friend and confidant in the books. The devil sets up a fake accident in which the Monsignor is accused of hitting a young girl with his car, and the devil is on the scene, rabble rousing and getting people all riled up and saying, they're gonna let this Monsignor go, etc. And that develops into full blown rioting. Now, what is that based on? In Brooklyn, when I was in the DA's office, there was a series of riots that occurred in a section called Crown Heights, which is a section of Orthodox Jews, and also Caribbean Americans and some Hispanics, etc. One afternoon, one summer evening, the head rabbi was returning to his home, and one of the in kind of a two-car entourage, and the car that, not with the rabbi, but the car that was either behind him or in front of him, gets into an accident and hits a young Caribbean American kid on his bicycle, and he dies. The kid dies. The rabbi, it was a total accident. But of course, because tensions were high in that neighborhood for other reasons, rabble rousers, people who wanted to create issues, started to ignite, started to incite, I should say, the people, saying that the rabbi has gotten off, he's not arrested, etc. And full blown rioting breaks out. 4 days, Tom, 4 days. And during the course of this rioting, a visiting rabbinical student from Australia is walking down the street near where he was staying, and he's set upon by a group of people, and he is killed for no reason other than he had a yarmulke on and he was a Jew. So that's the real life story. In my story, I turn it around and I have Romano as being the person who allegedly hits this young girl. As it turns out, it was actually the devil who hit her. But before the truth comes out, full-blown rioting breaks out in Brooklyn. And there's a reason for it. What happens is there are thousands of arrests. The courts are jammed. The Brooklyn House of Detention is jammed with people in jail. The precinct holding cells are jammed with people. Because the Brooklyn House was so filled with people, they had to take correction officers off the administrative areas and bring them to the cell areas to make sure that they could keep the peace. They had an administrator, a young administrator, working the desk, the visitor's desk. And one day, a guy comes in with an ID card, a lawyer's ID card, and says he's there to see his client, the Reverend. And the young person on the desk checks out the name on the card, and of course he doesn't know what the real person looks like, but the card is a counterfeit. And he sees that the name matches the lawyer who's lawyer of record, and he sends him in to the lawyer-client visiting room, which has no windows, so he can talk to his client, the Reverend, who's about to be sent upstate to prison. About a half hour later, the lawyer comes out, dressed exactly the same way as when he went in. And when the correction officers go to get the prisoner to bring him back to his cell, the room is empty. The person who walked out dressed as the lawyer was the Reverend. The person who went in as the lawyer was our man Jiz, and he disappeared. All that's left is a prison jumpsuit with a little note which is set for Gioca about chaos will reign and LePage, that's the Reverend's name, will be free. And that's what happens. The rioting instigated by the devil caused all of this chaos, and the devil allows the man to escape. So that's part 3. In part 4, how is this all connected? Well, in part 4, the rioting is so horrible that the city has to shut down. I'm sorry, that part of Brooklyn, it's shut down. Houses of worship are all shut down. Schools are shut down. Schools are closed. I'm sorry, schools are closed. Bars and restaurants, everything. Life essentially stopped because fires were set all over the place. And in one particular fire, in a Catholic church, a seminarian who's visiting the Catholic church sees that there's something wrong, goes into the sanctuary with a fire extinguisher to try to put out this fire, and he's never seen again. What happened is the fire spread so far into the church that the roof collapses. And when they clear the debris, there's the seminarian under the debris. Excuse me. Under the debris of the ceiling. But when the firefighters cleared the debris away, they realized that he wasn't killed by the ceiling. There's a bullet hole through his heart. And that's part 4. So that sets up part 4, which is the devil having now burnt the Catholic church down, killed another priest, or killed a priest. And it sets up a whole another series of events that occur in and around this particular church and in and around the death of this seminarian. And it leads me to the devil at the end Um, he winds up killing another person, and I'll give you a little hint as to what it was. When the person who kills the seminarian is put on trial, a judge from another part of the state is the presiding judge, and and she creates such a problem for Gioka that the person who's on trial is acquitted. So Gioka has to come up with another way, and what happens is he's able to bring the case into federal court as a violation of the seminarian civil rights, etc. Well, you don't find out that the judge was compromised by our man Jiz until later in the story, and and she finally is able to kind of write down what happened to her, and she leaves it with her law secretary. But before anybody finds it, she is picked up in a car by someone, and you don't know who it is until they get to the church that was burnt down, and on which is now being repaired. And on the steps of the church, the next morning, they find the judge dead. Who was it that drove her to the church? And who was it that killed her? Well, the Reverend is the driver, and my man Jiz is the murderer. And he gets into the car and takes off, and they drive away. And I leave the reader with the idea that maybe they're not coming back. Maybe this is finally peace, which is why there's a question mark in the title of anarchy, chaos, peace with a question mark. Except that at the funeral of the judge, Michaels gets the hymnal and he opens it up because there's a final hymn that he has to read, and there's a note in the book. And in the book, in the note, is a poem written by our man Jiz, which indicates essentially, I'm not going to read the poem to you, but what it indicates is, you think I'm done? I ain't done. So that's how I now have a bridge to go into book four. So that's essentially it. And Tom, if I could turn this camera around and to my left, and you look under the stairs that lead up to the third floor of our apartment, you'll see boxes, and in those boxes are stories, are my summations, are
Oh
files,
wow.
stuff that I have. So I had to do book four, and and I yesterday I have to tell you this. I told you I'm in the middle of narrating book three for the audiobook. Um, as I'm doing that, it suddenly strikes me that I have the whole book four kind of laid out in my head. And I was struggling, Tom, I have to tell you. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to kind of get into it. I sat here yesterday afternoon on my phone and wrote the entire outline of book four that I'm going to do. So it was a productive day. And one other plug. I guess maybe now 3 weeks ago, book two, the audio book for book two, is finally released, and it's available in many places. The publisher hasn't gotten the okay yet from Amazon, but it's Barnes and Noble and many and tons of places that it's available. So for those of your listeners and viewers who don't read but want to listen, book two is now out on audiobook. Mm-hmm. And when I finish book three, I guess this will be out probably sometime in the late spring, maybe early summer. So that's what's going on with the Fallen Angel series. So
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. Yeah, you somehow managed to tell me more fucked up stories than Murder on the Bridge, which is impressive because I've always held
yeah.
that as the worst one, and I think you cleared it by a long shot today. So I don't know if
No,
I don't know what that says about either of us, but it's out there.
the
It's
Vernon, the Vernon, the real Reverend, the Vernon LeGrand, um, is like the worst of the worst, the worst of the worst. And I mean, to chop bodies up, young, innocent women, after having sex with them, after having their kids, his kids, um, to do what he did to them was absolutely pure evil,
well,
and
yeah,
there's
no,
no other way to describe it.
yeah, it's the kind of act that it's like some crimes you can understand not because you would do them or you agree with them, but you understand rationally. Like I understand theft. You want something that someone else has and you don't want
Yeah,
to work for it.
yeah,
I understand orchestrating the '08 financial crisis. You're evil, but I get the end goal. You want $1 billion in a yacht, so you're going to steal from a bunch of working class families. It's evil, but I understand it. I get where
right.
they're going. You could even you understand all this. You understand murder and rage, and then there are things where you go, like, what is that? That's like another. You could say, well, what about killing? Well, yeah, yeah, I understand mob hits. You're extrajudicial authority. You have warring factions and territories, and you're taking out the competition. It's not good, but I understand it. Then there are things like this where you go, what it, huh? Like what is? And you did, yeah, it does eventually. I think the silver lining in all of this is when you do kind of see these irrefutable examples of just evil. Where you go, there is no there's no power, this is just evil. I always try to find the silver lining in examples of pure evil, child sex trafficking, because that tells me if there is pure evil, well, then there's a polar opposite. And I think it's an unconventional way, but it's a way some people find their way back to God. Is they go, if there are these examples of pure evil,
Right.
then you must imply that you understand people that go to work because they have to get a paycheck, and then there are examples of people who are just selfless. I knew a Monsignor Lopez at my high school. There were just things he did where you're like, you I know you're not getting paid to go to this hospital, like, and then it finally dawns on you. You go, he's just a child of God. There is no other. And to me, that's where I try to kind of bring it back to a positive. Is it there that implies anything implies the exact opposite. And I think that's maybe like the if you could find the optimism or silver lining in I don't know chopping up women and
I
hooking
understand.
them. Yeah,
One one of the things that I make sure that I do in almost every one of the stories or any part of the book is that Michael always, is always reminded by Romano that he's got an ally aside from, from the cops and
yeah,
from the investigators, and the ally is God,
yeah,
and he uses them. And there are times, even in this book, where he's stuck and he can't figure out how to get out of a situation. He'll take a walk, maybe go to mass, say a prayer, and when he gets back, or maybe the next day, suddenly the solution, appears, or he gets it. He gets it in his head. Um, so anyway, I understand what
yeah,
you're saying, and
yeah.
so I hope that I have enticed your readers to or your listeners and viewers to go out there. The
Go
Fallen
grab
Angel
the book.
series, I think, is really good.
Go
And
grab the book. Give Mike a couple shekels.
yeah,
don't be a
and
zero.
and if you don't want to read it, book one and two are on
Yeah.
audio book. So they're out there. So
Don't be a bottom feeder. Go pay the man. But yeah, Mike, let's wrap this up. I'll text you. We'll
oh,
schedule the
thank
next
you, Tom.
one, and it won't be as long to the next one. Um, and yeah, guys, as always, all the links are in the description. Please go support Mike. Please go support his works, buy his books, all that good stuff. You can go find prior episodes of him on the show. And Mike, it's always good chatting with you, brother.
You too, my friend,
Thank
and
you.
take care.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, everybody. Peace.